Fear is ubiquitous. The lifespan of most non-rational animals has increased or decreased in relation to the manner in which fear, which is instinctual in non-human animals, preserves them from attack or encroachment upon their territory. The very presence of certain species of non-human animals invokes fear in other species. In this way, fear serves them. When we consider instinctual fear among non-rational animal species, we most often consider predators. But it is also true that species upon which the predators prey are also served by fear. For example, fear of the porcupine's quills will deter most predators from attacking the relatively unimpressive mammal. The same could be said of many other weaker species. Because fear is instinctual in non-human animals, with respect to the lack of rationality, fear can, in this case, be said to reside in the body. In human beings, creatures possessing an animal body and an immortal soul, and thus a rational intellect, fear takes many forms, and both serves and hinders all manner of desires. Fear is most often defined as a negative emotion. In fact, fear can intensify to such a degree that it is said to be crippling. In this way, fear, which in humans resides in the mind, can enslave the mind to such a degree that the body is rendered inoperative, or at the very least its normal operations are encumbered, and the human proceeds towards some initiative as though he were shackled. There is, however, a positive aspect to fear in human beings, the fear of death. Those humans who lose all fear of death, and so, we might say, have lost the will to live, are commonly accepted to be mentally ill. In this way, we can see how fear, which exists in the mind, can poison the mind, but the mind devoid of any kind of fear is said to be ill. In the Christian tradition, a certain kind of fear is raised to the level of virtue, the fear of the Lord. The fear of the Lord, Scripture states, is the beginning of wisdom. Thus, martyrs can go with happy hearts to the scene of martyrdom without natural fear, precisely because this natural fear has been replaced by the virtue of the fear of the Lord, such that the fear of the Lord can be said to have become a personified spirit, inasmuch as this fear triumphs over the natural inclination to preserve one's life at any cost. Martyrs, therefore, do not fear death, or rather we could say that their fear of death has been usurped by the fear of the Lord. In this way, martyrs are not said to be mentally ill, precisely because the fear of the Lord, which is a virtue, is the truly rational choice, and because they do not surrender their lives to servile fear, to folly, or to chance, but rather to the author of life. Concerning the present moment, fear and the anxiety induced by fear, both in oneself and in others, is ubiquitous, to the point that those who are not afraid are said to be, in some cases, mentally deficient, if not mentally ill. Moreover, we are told that those who are not afraid, even if they had good reason not to be afraid, are an inherent danger to others, those who are fearful. In this case, the twofold personification of fear can be said to reside in the figure of state authority who will readily exercise the power of penalty, and in those who cling voraciously to household items or to personal protective equipment or to the narrative of fear foisted upon them daily, even hourly by the media. Fear is ubiquitous, and now the mask is ubiquitous. As of April 19th, residents of Pennsylvania, the state in which I reside, are mandated to wear a mask to enter an essential business. Firstly, the government has done a poor job of defining what is essential. Furthermore, the notion of essential loses all coherence when abortions, liquor, pornography, and gambling, all of which are going forward in full force, are considered essential, but public liturgy, the sacraments, divine worship of any kind in public, and family gatherings, etc., are considered non-essential. Secondly, the government does not seem concerned with what exactly constitutes a mask or the effectiveness of said mask. What is important, however, is that your mouth is covered. Why? The coronavirus is precisely that, a virus. As such, it spreads in the same manner that other viruses spread, through droplets, such as when someone sneezes on you or in very close proximity to you, and through surface contact, and this is less likely. I have personally witnessed everything from surgical masks to bandanas to knit scarves being employed as masks. Without running the gamut of reasons why masks, especially homemade masks, are ineffective for all-day, everyday use, a few will suffice. Masks of most kind, even medical grade, are not necessarily designed to protect the wearer. Surgical masks are not designed to protect against aerosols, but droplets. The much lauded social distancing that has been ingrained in all of us is a better guard against infection than a mask. The use of face masks, when mandated by the government and forced upon a largely uneducated public, might cause an unfounded sense of confidence in the wearer. Again, common sense prevails over widely available protective equipment as a defense against a virus of any kind. Face masks of any kind are not intended to be worn all day, and in fact, their effectiveness is greatly diminished by each passing hour. This is due to frequent taking off and putting on of the mask, to the mask being saturated by one's own fluids via the mouth, etc. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, what is the real reason behind the mandate to wear masks? One does not have to be a conspiracy theorist, a term that is employed precisely to silence critics and skeptics of the common narrative. There are bad conspiracy theories and good conspiracy theories. The metric of judgment lies in the ability to prove the conspiracy, or at the very least to make a plausible case. However, the term itself is often used as a bludgeon and is most certainly an insult. A given theory might be good or bad, provable or implausible, but the fact is, conspiracies do exist. People and groups of people conspire to one end or another all the time. Without examining all the critical data here, it is likely and in fact provable that the media, in conjunction with various members of federal, state, and local government, have conspired to one degree or another to fashion a certain kind of narrative out of a pandemic that may or may not have occurred naturally to one degree or another. In fact, there is good evidence, and more comes to light seemingly daily, to implicate certain nation-states and certain powers within those states of creating the virus and wittingly or unwittingly releasing it into the population. That discussion, however, is not the purpose of this critique, let's call it, of the current mandate to wear masks, specifically, and the nature of the varying degrees of lockdown in general. Fear and the mask. What is a mask? The English word for person comes from the Latin persona. This has an ancient connection to the theater, specifically the mask that actors would wear when playing out dramas about the gods, the titans, or heroes. It was often the case that one actor would portray multiple characters, and they would do so with the aid of masks. An actor could be Zeus at one moment and Prometheus the next, etc. All that was needed was a changing of the mask. The changing of the mask meant a changing of the person. The ancients perhaps understood this better than we do in the modern and postmodern age. In the age of television and the big screen, we are largely disconnected from the world of classical or ancient theater, but not completely. Fear is ubiquitous, and it is the case in human beings that we both hate and love fear. How is this possible? The general idea is that fear is so ubiquitous, so much a part of life in a fallen world, a world of disease, of war, of death, that we have learned to grasp fear, to cope with fear, to deal with it in various ways. In fact, it is a common expression of a good time among peoples of varied cultures the world over to be scared, to be frightened, and to frighten others. We tell our children fairy tales and ghost stories with fantastical, frightful creatures, with mythological beasts, with devils and witches. Every 31st of October, people, mainly in Western nations, but indeed the world over, don costumes to scare one another and to be scared. This is Halloween. But even in those cultures that do not celebrate Halloween, there exists usually some equivalent. The point is that fear can be employed to have a good time, and it is the mask that most often plays the pivotal role. One need only watch as a child, him or herself one moment is suddenly transformed into whatever persona they are portraying once they don the mask. Again, the mask equals the person, psychologically speaking. A mask can both increase and inhibit the level of intimacy that one feels toward another or toward a crowd. The masked bank robber, being the only masked person, exists as a specter of fear and thus holds dominance over the people he is robbing. Contrariwise, the mask can also lend itself to a feeling of equality, such as people feel when they are masked at a costume party. Go to one of these parties without a mask, without a costume, and see how comfortable you feel. These feelings, of course, are ultimately subjective, but they are so universally true, meaning that they hold in most instances that they very nearly approach the level of objective truth. In a study published in the Bulletin of the Psychonomic Society in 1991, 4 experimenters studied the effect of masks upon young children and their ability to distinguish between appearance and reality. The experimenters found that 2 errors emerge. Quote, the first type of error involves phenomenism, responding with appearance when reality is correct. The second type of error involves intellectual realism, responding with reality when appearance is correct. End quote. The experimenters found that if a concept of reality were not already understood, then a comparison between what is real and what only appears to be real is impossible. Quote, emphasis was placed on the idea that sometimes things could look one way to the child's eyes while they were really and truly a different way. Following this conversation, the child was asked to put on the Mickey Mouse mask and to look in a mirror held by the second experimenter. The first experimenter said, when you look at yourself in the mirror right now, you look like a mouse. But you really and truly aren't a mouse. Then the second experimenter removed the mask while the first experimenter said, you're really and truly whatever the child's name was. This sequence was repeated twice, with the first experimenter saying, sometimes things look one way to your eyes while the child was wearing the mask, and when they really and truly are a different way, after the second experimenter removed the mask from the child's face. End quote. Earlier today, a cashier at a local gas station informed me that I had to wear a mask to enter the essential business. He was kind enough to allow me to purchase what I needed, but he informed me that he could not do so in the future unless I was wearing a mask. He was also kind enough to inform me that they indeed sold the masks that were a prerequisite for entering the store. I suppose I would have had to purchase a mask somewhere else in order to enter the store to buy his mask, but I digress. In response to the clerk, I answered with intellectual realism. I am no more of a danger to him or the other patrons than the 2 people in the back whiling away their time and money playing an essential gambling machine while wearing masks. But the appearance in this case was practically correct. So-and-so dictated that you have to have a mask on to enter, so I have to have a mask on to enter, at least from this point onward. The clerk, of course, answered with the error of phenomenism. I have to be seen wearing the mask to enter, to purchase, when in reality I am no more of a threat than the masked gambler or the masked young man buying vanilla-flavored blunts. Multiply this scene 1,000,000 times over and you come to the conclusion. The mask is a source of fear whilst simultaneously being an assuagement of fear. Either way, fear is ubiquitous and we are reacting irrationally to fear. The experimenters of the aforementioned study noted that the young American children most likely reacted differently than children of some other culture might, precisely because they have already been habituated to masks and play acting with masks. A young child of 4 or 5 can most likely identify that they are not Mickey Mouse, that they are indeed Johnny or Jessica. But take that same child to Disney World and show them the real Mickey, the life-sized mouse with the oversized head, and most will identify that character as Mickey Mouse, not as a short adult in a costume. How long can reality hold out when appearance is habituated by mandate? The new normal. The idea of the new normal has been a kind of fetish of the mainstream media and indeed many politicians since the virus hit the United States. The new normal, we are told, is in a state of becoming and will take hold once the curve has been flattened. Speculations abound concerning what precisely the new normal might be or what it might look like. What we do know is that it will be new, and that it will be unlike our current normal, which begs the question, wouldn't that constitute an abnormality? Again, the idea is that we are experiencing a paradigm shift, and that shift must necessarily be driven by some kind of fear. This is not the fear of the martyrs. This is not the fear of the God-fearing. Rather, this is the fear that necessitates masks and the distancing of one person from another, one family from another, etc. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, has suggested that the advent of the coronavirus should signal the departure of the handshake as normative behavior. This, at least, is some indicator of the new normal that the powers behind the mask, so to speak, have in mind. Is there anything inherently dangerous in a handshake? No. Is there anything inherently dangerous in standing some predetermined distance from another person without a mask on? No. Reality answers in the negative, and the conclusions are demonstrable. But appearances can be deceiving, and, I argue, are meant to deceive in this instance. Now we are warned a new normal is upon us. A new normal in which people not only socially distance themselves, but they wear masks as well, and God forbid if one man should shake another's hand. This is intolerable, irrational, and mostly, if not wholly, driven by fear. To what end? Dr. Fauci represents to the United States and to the world a scientific figurehead. I use the word figurehead because Dr. Fauci, who is not an elected official, ought not to be capable of wielding the immense power that he seems to wield. According to our system of government, unelected people, regardless of their level of competency, ought not to be elevated to the level of elected officials in making decisions or influencing decisions, regardless of the crisis or the hysteria that surrounds the crisis. It is prudential for a sagacious governor of human affairs to consult a wise person or an expert in some field when making decisions concerning that field. This is not, however, the current situation. From the President of the United States to the governors of states and onward down the ladder of command authority, we are met time and again with the ubiquitous phrase, "I am listening to the science," or "we will listen to the science." Never mind that the science is incomplete. Never mind that different scientists differ about different things, some drastically so. And never mind that these same scientists, the ones who have gained far too much power over practical decisions affecting everyday life, have been wrong in the very recent past, very wrong and demonstrably so. Dr. Fauci represents the totemizing of science as the paramount of human reason. I use the word totem because there is ascribed to the scientist in the postmodern world a kind of magical potency of manifestation. The scientist speaks what is, and by speaking causes what is not to come to be. This, of course, is irrational, but we are nonetheless anchored to the abysmal depths of human ignorance by this kind of idolatry. I say idolatry because very many have ascribed a kind of godlike omniscience to scientists. God creates gratuitously ex nihilo by the power of his word. The scientist, according to the postmodern idolatry, creates a new normal ex nihilo by the power of suggestion. And this suggestion is carried into law by the power of the word of the state. So I, a resident of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, have to wear a face mask of whatever kind in order to enter the gas station because Dr. Rachel Levine, a man who pretends to be a woman, would have it to be such. The new Prometheus. Mary Shelley subtitled her famous Gothic novel Frankenstein, The New Prometheus. In Greek mythology, Prometheus was a titan who tricked Zeus for the sake of humanity, inciting Zeus to punish humanity by removing the ability to make fire from mankind. In turn, Prometheus stole fire and gave it to man. For his crime, Prometheus was punished by Zeus by being chained to a rock and held there helpless while an eagle, the symbol of Zeus, came each day to eat his liver. Prometheus's liver would grow back every day, of course, because Prometheus is immortal. Man was not off the hook. In order to punish mankind, the gods sent Pandora among them, and without going into the long tale, Pandora opened a jar or box and unleashed all manner of diseases and plagues and catastrophes upon humanity. Only hope remained in the jar. What is the meaning? The price to be paid for the stealing of divine fire is the wrath of the gods. In Shelley's novel, Dr. Frankenstein creates a monster. He plays God and creates a very inhuman, human-looking thing. The story is well known. The monster itself is only a mirror of the monstrous ambitions of the doctor, and in the end, the whole affair is a tragedy. In fact, the monster longs to be what it appears to be but can never be, no matter how much the doctor or the monster itself wishes it so. In our time, we have dealt with and are dealing with and will deal with the various diseases and catastrophes that pour out of Pandora's jar. This is a pagan way of expressing the very real condition of a fallen world and a fallen human nature. What is needed as a remedy is the balm of faith, which comes from a self-revelation of the divine, of his logos. Here we have the embracing of the personification of the fear of the Lord. A body you have prepared for me. Behold, I come to do your will. It is an embracing of rationality, not of fear. Philosophy, too, when rightly done, can provide an immense help. Philosophy helps a man to peer toward the eternal, to see his world and himself in relation to it, to deal with metaphysics, with the nature of being. Rational materialism, which is the forefather of the current cult of scientism, under the yoke of which we labor, is the great Prometheus of our time. In bygone days, men of science sought to lower the fire of the divine logos to the plane of the material, seeking what is metaphysically true in the realm of matter, reducing all things to categories of the mind, and so on. These men sought to liberate humanity from the superstitious musings of addle-minded bishops, from the endless speculations of the scholastics, and from the tyranny of Trinitarianism. Chief among these men was logic, cold, hard rationality, and for their part they served some good, even while they unleashed a great deal of evil themselves. For they, at least in their rejection of the divine logos, attempted to act in accord with the laws of nature. Now the Prometheus of rational materialism has been chained to the rock to have its liver pecked out and eaten by the eagle of the state. How is it that we should follow the science, meaning follow the scientists who affirm such irrational absurdities as abortion as essential and transgenderism as logical? This virus, for whatever it is and whatever it is not, is being presented to us in the manner of Hegelian dialectic. Being, nothing, becoming. Normal, virus, the new normal as the synthesis. The new Prometheus is gone. In his place is the new Prometheus, the new normal that is, in fact, an absurdity. Follow the science, says the governor, and hands the reins of power, the power over spiritual, social, and psychological and physical reality, to Madame Frankenstein, a thing more hideous in its irrationality than Victor Frankenstein's monster. A man who grew out his hair, took voice lessons to sound like a woman, and is now a quote-unquote mother of 2 children. In conclusion, this isn't really about whether or not we should wear masks to prevent the spread of COVID-19, or whether or not the economy should reopen, or whether or not we should stop shaking each other's hands, though the latter is closer to the heart of the matter. This is about the ubiquity of fear, the manipulation of a pandemic, and the mandating of personas. It is about a governor who follows the science of a mentally ill man called Rachel, who has the power to lock us in our homes, bar us from our churches, and make us wear masks as long as he chooses. It is about the dialectic of the new normal, about appearance and reality, and the power of the new Prometheus to bring us the fire of science, which is really the darkness of ignorance and the ubiquity of fear.